Hi, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Harry here to talk about the latest submission from Jack Smith to the D.C. Court of Appeals hearing the Donald Trump's appeal from the gag order that Judge Chutkan entered, but also more generally. And what's interesting about it is the way that these different gag order efforts and more generally the obstreperous, that's a sort of SAT word for it, completely assholic tweets by and social media messages by Donald Trump are just kind of interrelating and causing fits for the whole court system. Okay, so we're talking here about the interplay between the civil fraud case currently going on in New York and the criminal case that is set to at least begin jury selection procedures pretty soon. We're really chugging along. That's February 9th in the Judge Tanya Chutkan case. And in that case, as you'll recall from last week, a gag order that she had entered and then re-entered after appeal to the appellate court, the D.C. Circuit, was heard by 3 judges. And people's views generally were that they were sympathetic with the gag order and what Chutkan needs to do, but were maybe not fully persuaded that it'd been not just Trump's, but the country's First Amendment rights to hear from the putative candidate of one party for president maybe needed to be more protected. We'll see where that goes. Now we have a similar drama playing out in New York with a case that's almost over, which I think figures in things, but it poses the same, risk that somebody is just going to come out of the woodwork and attack a perceived enemy of the great man's voice that they're channeling or hearing, Donald Trump. So in New York and in the fraud trial, you have a limited gag order based on the really continual lambasting, both inappropriate and false, of Allison Greenfield, Engoron's clerk. And Trump also has moved for a mistrial on that basis. Engoron promptly denied it, and that won't be seen again until after the trial case is over, after liability is determined. But on the gag order part, Trump has appealed along with some other things. And it's kind of weird under New York practice. But first, Engoron is one of the guys who are being sued by Trump, as it turns out. So Engoron has a lawyer, in theory, representing him and defending to the appellate division, the intermediate court in New York. And they filed a submission that repeats all the incredible nastiness and threats and intimidation that have been rained down on Allison Greenfield by Trump's social media tweeting. And to really put a point on it, when it went to the appellate division and they entered something akin to an administrative stay. It's been stayed now, the gag order, not as an indication they're going to reverse on the merits, but just because of New York procedure. And Trump took that as open season again on the clerk and, totally has lambasted her. On Thanksgiving, he sent a sarcastic, caustic, happy Thanksgiving message in which he called her, he went after everybody, Jack Smith, probably more than anybody, but Engoron, the judge, and Greenfield, the law clerk, as biased and violating election laws, which she isn't, and all kinds of trash. But what does that occasion? And we know from a recent filing in the appeal for the gag order, which attached 275 single-spaced messages that were either transcribed voicemails, her, among other things, the law clerk's private line, email, completely compromised. Can you imagine? You log on, you have 89 messages, and they're all basically tirades against you, and a very large percentage of them turn out to be anti-Semitic, part of the whole Trump dog whistle problem. He himself doesn't go there, but his followers do. So as part of the New York fraud appeal, the gag order, Engoron's lawyer and AG attached, an incredible long list of absolutely beyond the pale threatening tirades. Okay, so that catches you up there. And then what happens yesterday? Really interesting, it seems to me. Jack Smith turns around and submits that filing with its attached representations about all the nasty and anti-Semitic messages that Greenfield has fielded after Trump does social media about her, attaches it to the DC Circuit under a special rule that says once there's been oral argument and appeal, you can still submit certain kinds of information. In fact, Trump immediately comes in and says, this doesn't fit the rule and you shouldn't listen to it at all. But what's really interesting to me is Jack Smith and lawyers are now, I think, making explicit what has to be implicit in the minds of all these judges. Yeah, the New York Appellate Division is considering just what was said about Engoron. And yeah, the DC Circuit is considering exactly, was he threatening witnesses and these social tweets, etc. But we've got a really ominous and not improbable, it seems to me, specter that is weighing heavily on all their minds, and it's not clear judges have the tools to address it, and that is that some crazy, maybe lone wolf that Trump animates and puts into play will react to this one or that one or the other one, and will go after someone possibly connected to the very trial a judge is considering or just out there, and it could potentially be fatal. That's in essence what happened to Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband, who David DePape, his assailant, was convicted last week for bludgeoning him with a hammer that really could have killed him. And in the DC case, after Trump tweets about, or whatever the verb should be for social media, about Chutkin, she receives a death threat from a woman in Texas, vile death threat, and that woman was arrested. But these judges, I think, are really thinking about his whole course of conduct around the country. He's making all of this, different planks of his campaign platform. And it's real. Somebody really, really could get hurt. And if you're the judge, well, besides that's terrible in and of itself, if you're the judge, you turn down a gag order and Trump says something and some crazy somewhere goes and attacks someone who he's addressed it to, it's a tragedy, and B, the scrutiny on you is like really heavy and problematic. So we've got an unprecedented problem that each of these judges are encountering, but that now, maybe it's been this way behind the scenes, but now expressly in front of the scenes are being interwoven by, and the illustration today is Jack Smith saying, hey, DC Circuit, thinking about what to do and how to protect Trump's rights, but also witnesses and the trial. Look over here, what the hell's going on in New York, where he tweets about social media, about a clerk, and she gets an unbelievable avalanche of nasty, vituperative, anti-Semitic messages. You've got to put a stop to that somehow, and you've got to put that in the balance of the First Amendment rights you are weighing. So, God forbid, but it's not so improbable that something terrible happens to somebody involved in one of these trials, and that the assailant is some lone wolf who hears a call from the former 45th president of the United States and just goes into action. And the country's on tenterhooks, and individual judges are as well. And this shows how, judges normally just think of what's going on in front of their courtroom, but they can't now with this madman under 91 different criminal counts and civil ones as well. So he's served that up as relevant to the DC Circuit. I dare say they'll find it that, whether it shows up in their opinion or not. And this is really part of what makes them have to brood over this motion and the overall unprecedented situation of an indicted former president who is making his legal strategy, the political strategy of lambasting, lying about, vilifying everyone involved in the prosecutions. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.